So
rankings.
good to be
Whoa.
a Knicks fan right now. It really is. I mean, they are the talk of the town. You got fans going out after they beat Indiana over the weekend, dancing in the streets outside MSG in New York City, celebrating as you saw those Twitter videos put out there. I mean, it is a absolute joy to be a Knicks fan right now. It really is. I enjoy this team. I love this team. I love watching, even though he's been inconsistent with the outside shot, the development of RJ Barrett. How many accolades can we throw at the all-star Julius Randle? IQ quickly has been a wonderkin as the 25th overall pick. I mean, you even have Obi Toppin getting into the mix, very, very limited, but getting into the mix, and he's going to be part of the dunk contest all-star weekend down in Atlanta this upcoming weekend, this Sunday night. So, I mean, all in all, the coaching job that Thibodeau has done with this team, it's fun to be a Knicks fan. I'll tell you, it really is. I'm all in on this team. We've talked about adding to this team. Well, we'll see what they do and the names that have been out there. And we've talked about them, bandied about, but I don't want to break this group up right now. I really don't. I mean, we could get into the rotations of Tom Thibodeau that might drive some Knicks fans crazy a little bit at times, but they're a joy to watch. They really are. And what makes it even sweeter is it comes out of nowhere. You weren't expecting it. I certainly wasn't. I wasn't expecting this team to be 18-17 through the first 35 games of the NBA regular season. I was happy with the hiring of Tom Thibodeau as coach. I like that. You didn't know where they were going to go. We talked about Russell Westbrook and Gordon Hayward before the start of the NBA season. Swing and a miss on both of those occasions, more specifically Hayward, who took more money and guaranteed money and went down to play for MJ and Charlotte after he decided to opt out of his deal up in Beantown with the Boston Celtics. So I didn't know what to expect, and that's what makes it sweeter. When you have no expectations, when you don't think the team is going to be particularly good, and then they surprise you. Listen, it's not a great Eastern Conference outside the top three of Milwaukee, Philly, and obviously the Brooklyn Nets. I get that, and they're sitting as the fourth seed because they're one game over the 500 mark. But as a Knicks fan, I'll take it. And the unexpected success this year makes it all that much sweeter.
Okay, so this is where I become kind of torn with the Knicks because they're doing something that we haven't seen in such a long time, which is just be over 500 in the month of March. It's been so long since we've had anything to grasp onto, really 2012, 2013, when we've been able to say that they were above 500 team in this month. And so I get wanting to now put all these new expectations on this team, like, hey, this would now be a disappointment if they don't make the playoffs, or I expect them to make the playoffs, or something like that. And I have to just stop myself because while I'm excited about the Knicks, I love watching them, this is super fun, all of it, I still realize that their margin for error just seems really, really razor thin. And the reason is because of Julius Randle and because he is so much about what makes this team go. And that's, credit to RJ, who's been shooting excellent, basically since the calendar, turned to 2021. He's been fantastic, 40% from three since that time. It's just the free throws haven't come around, but you know what I mean. He's been excellent. So this is my thing, though. I'm starting to come around a little more on a Victor Oladipo trade, and here's why. Because depending on what the return would be, and I would say even if it's that second first-round selection, the Mavericks selection, if you will, even if it costs that late first round, we think might be a late first-round selection, I'm almost coming around to it more because this team has shown that defensively they have made that commitment. So that's already going to keep you in tons of games. If you lose Randle, though, who played 38 minutes last night in a blowout, Tom Thibodeau, I think, does not feel like he can sit Julius Randle. He can't, I don't think he trusts this team without Randle on the floor, and I understand why. If something happened to Julius Randle, knock on wood that it doesn't, it's over for this team. So with that in mind, I almost feel like trading for an Oladipo at least gives you some kind of safety net that if something happened with Randle, if he has to, if his minutes do have to come down a little bit, if he needs to take a little bit of a break, we got a long way to go here. At least now that you can't say the season would be over. I don't think RJ Barrett is ready to shoulder that full load like what Julius Randle is doing for this team. So maybe a couple weeks ago, I wasn't really in on an Oladipo, but now, because if you want to keep this core together, then you're not going to do Bradley Beal right now. You're not going to do Zach LaVine most likely. These are going to be these bigger trades. If there's a smaller trade that could be made to get Oladipo, now I'm thinking, I think I'm coming around to it just to give this Knicks team a little bit more of a safety net because
I get it.
I want to go all in. Like, I want to get nuts and be like, they're 4th overall in the Eastern Conference right now. They'd be hosting a playoff game if the season ended today. But I do realize their margin for error is still very thin, and I do think they need some help because if something happened to Randall, where even if he missed 5 games, you're so slim right now with where you are. You need extra help. So I'm coming around on this Oladipo idea.
Yeah, well, and then you get the Oladipo news over the weekend that he turned down a 2-year contract exextension with the Houston Rockets. So
that was smart, though.
It's not exactly an Oladipo who's only played, 77 games, I believe, in the last 3. He's not been the epitome of health, but yeah, for all intents, it wouldn't cost you a lot. So it's not going to cost you what it's going to cost you for a Beal. It's not going to cost you for what it would cost you for Zach LaVine. We talked about Andre Drummond after the Berman column last week in the New York Post that the Knicks are, sniffing around Drummond with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and what it would cost them would be maybe like a veteran player and a second-round draft choice because they've got $15 million of cap space right around that number, and they've got that kind of money to play with where they can absorb a bigger deal. And I believe Drummond's making $27 or $28 million a year. So, yeah, Oladipo would make sense because of the cost. It would improve your chances right now. There'd be the uncertainty of the future. Would he resign here when he hits free agency? He's going to be looking for a max deal. So, and you wouldn't have to give up all that much to the Houston Rockets. That's fair. And I think you have to look at those viable options. I don't want to do anything that's going to drastically change the dynamic of this team. When I look at Barrett, when you look at Randall, when you look at the returning Mitchell Robinson, when you look at Quickly, I don't. I'm at that stage with this team now. And I understand, Maggie, listen, I know what they are. It doesn't take away from my enjoyment of watching this team night in and night out. I understand they're not a championship caliber team. I know that Julius Randle is logging a ton of minutes, but I like the culture, the tone, and the temperament that the head coach has set with this team. I like the fact that they do play defense.
Oh, yeah.
More often, most nights. I do like the fact that, they've got the buy-in from the players. I do like the addition of a Derrick Rose. There's a lot to like about this group, and like I mentioned before, and it's worth repeating, when, we joke around about that 17 Yankees team and why Yankee fans love that 17 Yankee team, because you know what? They came out of nowhere. You weren't expecting them to have that kind of a run. Now, the Knicks are not having that kind of a run. But my point still lies there within, is that when teams do things that you root for, that you're a fan of, that you really are not expecting coming into the season, you know what? It makes it even that much more enjoyable. I was just looking for Tom Thibodeau to set a tone, to kind of weed out the haves and the have-nots this year, to be a culture changer. I wasn't looking for this team to be a game over 500 and playing as inspired as they have. They've been fun to watch, and they've been enjoyable to watch. And what adds to it is that, I was not expecting this team to do what they have done up until this point. And Randall's been individually has been a wonderful story, deserved All-Star. You mentioned R.J. Barrett, the shooting percentage since the turn of the year. The addition of Derrick Rose, Amon Quickly coming out of nowhere, being the 25th overall pick, a pick that a lot of draft Knicks graded out as a D when the Knicks selected him coming out of Kentucky. And look at what Emmanuel Quickly has been, one of the best rookies in all the NBA this year. He's been wonderful. So it's fun. It's a joy. I'm enjoying the journey. And yeah, by March 25th, Maggie, if they could add a veteran like a Victor Oladipo and not give up, any of those first-round draft assets because you can get them on the cheap, or maybe you can be real creative in that deal, and because the Rockets realize they're not going to be able to sign him to a long-term deal. Yeah, that's a deal I think the Knicks are going to have to make to add to this group and add to this team.
Yeah, it's funny because I think people on the outside, if you just dropped into New York City today and you turned on the fan and you're like, wait a minute, why are we throwing a parade for the Knicks just because they're one game over 500? That sounds insane, especially because of this crazy high standard that we hold all of our teams to. But if you're living this day by day and you understand what the last 20 years has been like, you understand what a big step forward this is. And over the weekend was the 1-year anniversary since Leon Rose has been hired. And obviously the most important thing that he did was hiring Tom Thibodeau. And that has been the one move that has paid off so dearly for him, along with, bringing over some Kentucky influence and whatever that influence had on Julius Randle. I mean, those are the changes that have turned everything around for the Knicks. And my instinct is just Move the goalposts. Change all the expectations. This should be a playoff team. This will be disappointing if they're not a playoff team because, listen, if they can hold up defensively in the way they've been playing, and if you're literally a top 3 team in the league defensively, how good do you have to be offensively to be a playoff team? Can you be middle of the pack? I mean, that's what you're kind of hoping for the Knicks, right? They could be kind of middle of the pack offensively in terms of total, offensive, production, right? It's almost like the opposite conversation we have with the Nets. Like, the Nets are one of the top teams offensively, and we're wondering, okay, what's the bare minimum they need to be defensively in order to be a championship team? This is a little bit different for the Knicks. I'm wondering if the defense holds, where do they actually have to be offensively just to get into the playoffs? Because that's going to be the bar by which they are judged. Because I really, again, hate to do it, but it's almost just like a compliment to them, which is changing the expectation, which is going into this year was not playoffs. Now here we are approaching the midway point of the season. It is playoffs.
It's great to talk about it. And listen, you can change. It would be as well as they played through the first 35 games. I think right now it would be a disappointment if they're not a playoff team this year. I do. I think it would be but I don't think, Maggie, they're going to collapse like that because of the thing that you mentioned. They defend. I mean, and that gives you an opportunity when you're not, if you are a pure offensive team, and obviously there's different levels. The Brooklyn Nets are in a different stratosphere as being a pure offensive team with all 3 of those players on the court at the same time. But when you're not a good defensive team, you could have a bad offensive night. You're not going to be able to get the necessary stops to be able to win that basketball game, right? So you look at the Knicks, what gives them and what makes them kind of an outlier in the NBA is the Lakers are an unbelievable defensive team when they are whole and when they're healthy, and they have 2 of the top 6 players in the world, in Anthony Davis and LeBron James, maybe 2 of the top 5 players in the world in both those individuals. When you look at the Knicks, what gives them an opportunity, they don't have that talent level, but what plays night in and night out is they're a willing defensive team, and they play together as a group. And as Tom Thibodeau said, Barrett and Randall have got a real good chemistry for each other on the court at the same time. You've seen Barrett use the motivation of being off the all-rookie teams a year ago. You're seeing Randall redefine his body, and he is committed offensively and defensively to this group. But that defense, the way that they defend, gives them an opportunity and would lead you to believe that even if you think this team bottoms out, they're not going to crater.
Yeah, they're not going to crater.
They're not.
If Julius Randle stays healthy and is able to play 35 minutes a game.
But you can say that about a lot of teams. I mean, look
at
the Lakers.
specifically this one,
well,
the way they're presently
the Lakers
constructed.
Without Dennis Schroeder and Anthony Davis.
Totally. Those are 2 huge pieces for them. Randall is the guy, and
for sure.
So that's where I'm like, yes, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm nodding along. I'm with you. It's just that it's all about Randall right now, and I wonder if for the Knicks to really go where they want to go this year, which is the playoffs, does it have to be about more than just Julius Randle? He's been phenomenal in the first half of the season. I could never have expected that he was going to have this kind of turnaround to his career. He deserves every accolade in the world. What happens in the second half of the year? I mean, think about it. There's 7 teams right now in the Eastern Conference that have 17 losses, right? Like, this is a conference that's very, very much bunched together. And I think you see some teams that are starting to make the ascension. Like, do we think that the Miami Heat are going to start making a bit of a rise? Do we think that the Indiana Pacers are going to become a better team? That was a great win for the Knicks on Saturday night, by the way. How about Frankie Smokes coming through? Not so much yesterday, but on Saturday night, Smokes with, closing out the Indiana Pacers. Do you think that, the Wizards, who have been a little bit better, are they going to get better? The Chicago Bulls are 15-17 right now. Are they going to be getting better? It's just going to be interesting in the second half of the season if you're going to separate the who's real and who's not. And if the Knicks want to be in that who's real conversation, I mean, now I'm thinking they have to add because of Randall. He's shouldering so much of the load. He's shouldering it all.
Yeah, he really is. If he gets hurt, clearly, I mean, it would change the course of this Knicks team. But you know what? Let's deal with the positive. He's healthy. They destroyed the Pistons last night by 19.
Good,
the
off
Knicks
a back-to-back
seed
like
in
that.
The Eastern Conference.
Yep.
They're an absolute blast to watch. I'm waking up. I'm playing Go New York, Go New York, Go. # New York forever. It is a joy to be a Knicks fan right now. It's an absolute blast as they're sitting the game over the 500 mark.